No one would give a home to the Apache woman, until the cowboy said, "I have two, now we are six." In this town, everyone knew each other's business and strangers were rarely welcomed. But there was one stranger who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders, and yet she walked with a quiet dignity. She was an Apache woman, strong and proud, but the town had no place for her. People avoided her, whispered about her, and many outright refused to let her into their homes. She was alone, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and a few memories of a family long gone. She wandered from place to place, always searching for shelter and food. Inns were full, and when she asked for a room, the owners shook their heads. "No room," they said, or worse, "we don't take in people like you." Public spaces offered little comfort, benches were cold, and the sun could only do so much to warm her bones. She learned to make use of barns, abandoned sheds, and the quiet corners of the town where no one looked. She kept herself busy, gathering small pieces of wood to make fires, collecting water, and hunting small animals when she could. Her hands were calloused, her face often streaked with dirt, but her eyes remained bright, alert, and full of life. Even though the world around her seemed cold, she never gave up hope. She believed there was a place for her somewhere, a place where she could be safe and accepted. Each rejection was a blow, but she took it in stride, reminding herself that kindness might still exist somewhere. She helped people when she could, even if they didn't return the favor. If someone dropped something on the street, she would pick it up and hand it back. If she saw a child hungry, she would share a small piece of bread she had saved. These little acts didn't make her any less weary, but they kept her spirit alive. The townspeople didn't understand her. Some were afraid because she was different. Others were suspicious, thinking she might bring trouble. Rumors spread about her past, about where she came from and who she had known. Some said she had been part of a wild group in the desert. Others claimed she had been involved in something dangerous. The stories were mostly untrue, but the town didn't care. People preferred fear over understanding. Still, she walked with her head held high, refusing to let the whispers define her. It was during one particularly bitter winter that a man noticed her. He was a cowboy, a kind-hearted man who had spent his life traveling from town to town, helping where he could. He had 2 children of his own and knew the hardships of the world, but he also understood the value of compassion. He saw the woman from a distance, standing near the edge of the town with her coat pulled tightly around her. Her cheeks were red from the cold and her hands were shaking. Most people would have looked away, but he didn't. He felt something in her presence, a quiet strength, a resilience that demanded attention. The cowboy approached her cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up, surprised to see someone speaking to her with genuine concern. Most people either ignored her or treated her with suspicion. "I'm managing," she replied softly. Her voice was calm, but there was a tiredness in it that he couldn't miss. Over the next few days, he began offering small gestures of help. Sometimes it was a hot meal, sometimes a blanket to keep her warm during the night. She was cautious at first, unsure if he had an ulterior motive. But as she got to know him, she realized he truly wanted to help. They would sit near a fire and he would ask her about her journey, about the people she had known, and about the struggles she had faced. She didn't tell him everything at once. Trust had to be earned, and hers had been broken many times before. But she shared fragments of her story, enough for him to understand the kind of life she had lived. She told him about her family, who had been taken from her in her youth. She spoke of the long journeys she had made across deserts and plains, seeking a place where she could belong. She recounted the nights she had spent alone, the cold wind biting at her skin and the hunger that gnawed at her stomach. The cowboy listened without judgment. He didn't offer empty words or false promises. He simply listened, and in that act alone, he gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: respect. The town continued to turn its back on her, but she didn't let it crush her spirit. She learned to find strength in the small moments. A child's smile, the warmth of a fire, the kindness of a stranger, all of these reminded her that not everyone was cruel or indifferent. and the cowboy became the symbol of that hope. He didn't just see her as an outsider or a stranger. He saw her as a person with worth, courage, and dignity. Then came a particularly harsh storm. Snow fell heavily, covering the streets and making travel almost impossible. The wind howled through the town, and the cold was relentless. The woman had no proper shelter, and each passing hour made survival more difficult. She found a small shed on the outskirts of town, but it offered little protection from the storm. The cowboy, seeing her struggle from a distance, knew he could not wait any longer. He rode through the snow, braving the wind and freezing temperatures until he reached her. "You can't stay here," he said, his voice firm but kind. "It's not safe. You need shelter." She shook her head, hesitant and proud. "I don't want to trouble anyone," she said, but the cowboy wouldn't take no for an answer. He could see that her life was in danger, and he knew that leaving her alone was not an option. "It's not trouble," he said. "You need a place to be safe. I can help." But the cowboy didn't care what they thought. He was determined to help her, no matter the cost. As they walked, he thought about his own children, about the warmth of his home, and about the life he could share with someone who truly needed it. He felt a sense of purpose, a feeling that he was doing the right thing. When they reached his home, he opened the door and gestured for her to come in. The warmth hit her immediately, and she felt a relief she hadn't known in months. It was a small home, simple and modest, but it was full of care and love. The cowboy introduced her to his children, who were curious and cautious at first. They had never met anyone like her, and she had never been around children in a safe environment. But there was a quiet understanding, a sense of connection that didn't need words. That night, as the storm raged outside, the woman sat by the fire, feeling a sense of safety she had not known in years. The cowboy brought her food, offered her a warm blanket, and simply sat with her. There were no judgments, no questions that pried too deeply, only a quiet presence that was comforting. She realized that for the first time she was not alone. Someone cared. Someone saw her not as an outsider, but as a person who deserved kindness and protection. In those quiet moments, she began to believe that perhaps life could be different. Perhaps there were people who would not turn their backs on her. Perhaps there was a place where she could belong. The storm outside continued, but inside there was warmth, hope, and the beginning of trust. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would still be challenges, and the town might still judge her. But she also knew that she had found an ally, someone who saw her for who she was, and that gave her strength. As she drifted off to sleep that night, she thought about the kindness of the cowboy and the small gestures that had made all the difference. She realized that survival was not just about finding food or shelter. It was about finding people who would stand by you, who would see your worth even when the world refused to. And in that quiet home, amidst the cold and the snow, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. Life in the cowboy's home was unlike anything the Apache woman had ever known. For years, she had been wandering alone, struggling just to survive, and now she was surrounded by warmth, food, and people who cared about her. The house was small, simple, and filled with the laughter and chatter of children. At first, she felt out of place. She wasn't sure how to act around them, how to share a home with people who were not her family by blood. But the cowboy made her feel welcome from the very beginning. "I have two," he said with a smile one evening, gesturing to his children. "Now we are 6. Those words, simple as they were, carried more meaning than anything she had heard in years. They spoke of acceptance, of trust, and of belonging. She realized that she was no longer alone, that there were people who would stand by her and protect her. Slowly she began to let herself relax, to feel that this could be a place where she truly belonged. The first few days were a learning process for both her and the children. She learned the routines of the house, the times for meals, the chores that needed doing, and the small rules that kept the household running smoothly. The children, in turn, were learning about her. They had never met anyone like her before, someone who had lived a life so different from theirs, who had faced challenges that they could barely imagine. They were curious and sometimes cautious, but there was something about her quiet strength that drew them in. She began to share small parts of her heritage with them. She told them stories of her people, of the traditions she had grown up with, and of the lessons her family had taught her. The children listened with wide eyes, fascinated by tales of bravery, nature, and respect for the world around them. She showed them how to make simple crafts, how to observe the signs of the weather, and how to move quietly and carefully through the land. The cowboy watched this quietly, proud to see the children learning from her, and grateful for the gentle guidance she provided. As the days turned into weeks, the Apache woman found herself becoming a part of the household in ways she had never expected. She helped with meals, cleaned the small home, and tended to the children when they were sick or upset. Her presence brought a new sense of calm and stability. The children grew attached to her, calling her aunt at first, and later simply enjoying her company as if she had always been part of their lives. She found joy in their laughter, comfort in their trust, and a sense of purpose she had not felt in many years. The town, however, was not immediately welcoming. Some people whispered behind their hands when they saw her walking through the streets with the cowboy and his children. Others were suspicious, wondering why a man of respect in the town would take in someone they had long ignored or feared. But the cowboy did not let their words deter him. He continued to treat her with kindness, continued to involve her in the daily life of his family, and continued to show the town that she was not a threat, but a person of value and strength. Slowly, the town began to change its perception. People saw her helping the children, saw the respect and affection in the way the cowboy treated her, and began to understand that she was not someone to fear or judge. They noticed the small ways she contributed to the community, helping neighbors with chores, offering advice when asked, and sharing her knowledge of the land. These actions, combined with the cowboy's quiet but firm support, began to shift opinions. Prejudice did not disappear overnight, but the first cracks began to show, and with time, some townspeople even started to offer their own acts of kindness. Life at home continued to grow richer. The Apache woman found herself laughing more than she had in years, sharing stories not just of her past struggles, but also of small joys and triumphs. She taught the children how to observe the stars, how to find plants that could be used for medicine, and how to respect animals and the land. The children, in turn, brought her laughter and energy, reminding her that life could be beautiful even after hardship. She realized that family was not only about blood but about trust, love, and shared experiences. The cowboy watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. He had always believed that people deserved a chance, that kindness could change lives, and that acceptance was stronger than prejudice. Seeing the woman thrive in his home, seeing the children grow attached to her, and seeing the town slowly soften its attitude was proof that his decision had been right. He never treated her as a charity case or a burden. He treated her as part of the family, and in return, she gave her loyalty, wisdom, and love. Winter gave way to spring, and the household blossomed along with the season. The garden outside the home began to thrive under their care, much like the family itself. The Apache woman worked alongside the cowboy and the children, planting seeds, tending vegetables, and preparing the land. She shared traditional ways of growing and preserving food, combining her knowledge with the cowboy's practical experience. Together, they created not just a home, but a small sanctuary in a world that had often seemed harsh and unforgiving. Neighbors who had once turned their backs began to notice the change. Some came to borrow tools, some asked for advice, and others simply nodded in greeting when passing by. The presence of the Apache woman and the kindness of the cowboy served as a quiet lesson in humanity. People began to see that judgment and fear were no substitute for understanding and compassion. They saw that a home could be filled with warmth and love, no matter who was in it, and that acceptance could transform even the hardest hearts. As months passed, the Apache woman felt a deep sense of belonging. She had found not only safety but also family, respect, and purpose. She had someone to care for, someone to laugh with, and someone to share her life with. The cowboy's children looked up to her. The cowboy treated her as an equal and partner in raising the family. And slowly, the town began to understand that she was more than her past, more than the prejudices others held against her. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and painted the sky with warm colors, the woman sat on the porch with the children playing nearby. The cowboy joined her, and for a moment they simply watched the world together. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the hardships, the cold nights, the lonely days of wandering. And now she realized she had a home, a family, and hope for the future. She had survived not just through her own strength, but through the kindness of someone who saw her worth when no one else did. The cowboy placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. "I told you once I have two. Now we are 6, he said softly. She smiled back, feeling the truth of his words more deeply than ever. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about acceptance, love, and the creation of a family that chose each other despite the world's doubts. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the support of those who truly cared for her. The story of the Apache woman and the cowboy became known quietly in the town. People whispered about it with curiosity, some with admiration, and some with disbelief. But the woman no longer needed the approval of the town. She had found what she had been searching for all along. A place where she belonged, people who valued her, and a life filled with hope and love. And so, in that small home with the warmth of the fire, the laughter of children, and the quiet strength of the cowboy beside her, the Apache woman finally felt safe. She had survived storms, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged into a life that she could never have imagined. The house was no longer just a building, it was a home. The children were no longer just kids she watched from a distance, they were family. And the cowboy, with his courage and compassion, had shown her that even in a world that often seemed cruel and unforgiving, kindness could create miracles. She looked around her home and thought about how far she had come. From being rejected by every door she knocked on, from wandering alone in snow and rain, to finding warmth, trust, and love, her life had changed completely. She realized that sometimes hope could arrive in the form of a simple act of kindness, in the decision of one person to see the value in someone who had been overlooked for so long. As the night grew darker, she felt a peace she had never known. The future was no longer something to fear. She had a home, a family, and the courage to face whatever came next. In the cowboy's words, she had found a truth she would carry forever. That family is not always about blood, but about love, acceptance, and standing together through life's storms. And with that, she rested, finally free from the loneliness and fear that had once defined her life.